Alrighty, welcome to episode 4 of Let's Talk Debt. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the recent stimulus bill, the $900 billion bill that was passed right at the end of the year, right around Christmas time. That included the $600 checks and many other provisions. I'm going to go over some of my issues with the bill. I'm probably going to rant a little bit, and we're going to see how that goes. So without further ado, pull up my notes here. My biggest problem with the stimulus bill is I think it sets a really bad precedent. There's definitely a lot of people hurting right now. There's definitely a lot of people that could be really helped by the cash injection that we saw, that people are still getting. Those stimulus checks are being rolled out right now. I think the worst part of it is that we've trained people now that if the politicians want to get whatever they want, if they want people to be furious about passing a bill no matter what's in it, because they didn't even read this thing. It was a $5,000 bill for stimulus, so they couldn't just make a couple page bill saying, all right, everyone's getting this much money, these programs are getting this much money. It's 5,000 pages of those things, plus tons of other miscellaneous pet projects and who's getting what money within a bill, because that's how it always goes. My biggest issue is that they're training all of us to say, oh boy, I just got a few $100s. And to not look at what else is in this bill or future bills. Because, again, there's a lot of voters out there, there's a lot of people that aren't really involved in the political process and are just so happy to get a check in the mail. And my fear is that we're teaching politicians that if they want to get what they want and hide whatever they want to hide in these long pork-filled bills, all they have to do is say, all right, we're going to spend the equivalent of almost $1 trillion. We're going to give people $600 checks. That only represented about 19% of the actual money that they spent were the individual checks. And because we're giving everyone this free money, people aren't going to care about all the money that we get to send to people that we are connected with and we benefit from that. So if there's any overarching issue that I have with this stimulus, it's that worry. Are those $600 checks going to help a lot of people that are struggling right now? Absolutely. Is the distribution of the rest of that money equitable? I don't think so. So without further ado, let's get into how this stimulus money was distributed. So again, you can check out the sources I'm looking at in the description below. Another round of PPP loans. I've talked to a lot of business owners that have been really helped by these. I'm kind of mixed on them because they aren't addressing those that directly need the funds. Always, again, there's a lot of imperfect solutions that are being doled out right now. So I'm torn. I think it's great that a lot of businesses are getting access to capital that need it so they can keep running. At the same time, though, I don't know if the taxpayer should be writing all these endless checks for companies that a lot of whom were struggling before COVID and were probably on their way out of business beforehand. And again, when you're trying to ram a lot of legislation through quickly and lending out a lot of money quickly, there's not a ton of room to be super picky about who you're lending this money to. So it's that trade-off of if we make this money hard to get, then we're going to eliminate a lot of fraud. If we make it easy to get, there's probably going to be more fraud. So $325 billion for small businesses. Again, mixed. I mean, a lot of that has to go to salaries and keeping employees on the payroll. Are a lot of companies keeping employees on that otherwise aren't really doing a ton right now? Are they paying a lot of salaries to people that are more de facto the owners of the business that they're essentially profiting? Because last year they paid themselves $150,000 salary. This year, even though they would have had to take a cut, they're not, because the government's just writing them the check. I'm sure there's a lot of that going on. $166 billion in direct checks. So Right around half of what is being allotted to small businesses through the PPE was the checks that were sent out to individuals. $120 billion for that beefed up unemployment, so that extra $300 per month. That perfect example of policy with good intentions causing issues. So again, an extra couple $100 a month for a lot of places with higher cost of living, like people probably needed it to stay afloat with all of the shutdowns imposed by the government and a lot of the economic damage that caused. But in a lot of areas that are lower cost of living, it has caused a lot of unemployment issues as far as people making more money on unemployment, not wanting to go back to work, and people being a little like hard pressed to find people that actually want to work at their businesses when you do have businesses that are doing well right now that are managing to make it. $69 billion for vaccines, testing, and tracing. That's probably pretty benign there. $45 billion for transportation. That's also one that I have some issue with. Should we be subsidizing? And again, a lot of this $45 billion for transportation is grants. So it's not loan money. It's, oh, we love the airline industry. We need all of these airline companies who are mismanaged and spent their money poorly for the last decade to survive. My opinion, let these airlines fail. There's going to be a demand for plane flights when this is over. It's not like the planes are going to disappear. There is some stickiness with some of the employees, but it's not like all of the assets that come together to make up these companies are just going to evaporate. When COVID's over and we do see a lot of the demand for flights come back, there are going to be companies that actually saved money, that have good, clean balance sheets, that don't have a lot of debt, that are going to step in and benefit and increase their market share and put a lot of those really bad airlines that spent all their money on stock buybacks out of business. So very unhappy about that one. Some of that transportation money went to public transit, which, again, that's been a black hole for money for a very long time. So not a huge fan of that either. Nutrition, agriculture, they're boosting the food stamps, the SNAP program assistance, with more people being unemployed. That was probably needed. $25 billion towards rental assistance, kind of mixed on that one. You really have to delve into what that actually is going towards. I have heard some good news that there's more rental assistance being focused on keeping people in their homes and actually paying the rent versus just focusing on the homelessness issue. Because a lot of the data that's coming out now is showing pretty clearly that a lot of our funds towards the homelessness issue is a lot better spent trying to keep people, kind of like preventative medicine, helping people that are having temporarily hard times to keep them in their apartments versus spending all of our money and all of our focus on homeless. So preventing people from becoming homeless that otherwise are productive individuals that could stay working and in their apartment. $12 billion to support small banks that serve low-income minority communities. Again, the issue that I have with a lot of these companies that are getting free money is that they aren't having an issue borrowing it in the private market. I mean, even way back in March and April, I remember looking at stories and articles and guests on CNBC, and they were talking about, oh, well, Carnival Cruise Ships just borrowed $1 billion and took a loan with one of their cruise ships as collateral. Like, if you're a business that has assets, like, you can weather this storm. It's called borrowing. And in the private market, they're at a price. There will be someone that actually lends you the money. It might not be the interest rate that you like, but if you want to keep your business around, it's the one you take. But when you have the government coming in and being the dummy in the room and saying, well, we'll just lend you all this money and we don't worry about paying us back. It's a forgivable loan, or it's a grant. Just take our money. Then there's no point in actually borrowing when you otherwise have the ability to. Okay, $10 billion for childcare. That's probably needed. I know that's been one of the issues that's been big. That's been one that a lot of people haven't been talking about. Um, with schools being closed, a lot of parents have had to move. A lot of parents have had to switch school districts so they can be closer to parents. They can actually provide childcare during the day, because it's a double whammy. I mean, a lot of parents have had to not only pay their normal taxes to their local public schools that they pay, but they've also had to try to figure out paying for childcare and arranging childcare during all this. So that's probably a good thing. $7 billion for broadband, so internet for people that couldn't afford it, that are low income. $82 billion for schools. A lot of that is retrofitting to help them operate with COVID going on. Kind of mixed on that one, because a lot of schools are going to be hurt financially by this crisis. But again, this money's just going out in a blanket fashion. And are a lot of the better run school districts going to suffer, because a lot of this money is going to schools that weren't doing well beforehand but are getting more or less bailed out now? So some interesting stuff there. As a whole, just not happy with how this is being handled. So much of the money, again, I was reading an article about some of the pork that's in it, like $1 billion for the Foundation of the Arts, museums that are getting a lot of money. When people are struggling, we don't need to be sending all this free money to private airline companies. Or I guess technically a lot of them are publicly traded, but we don't need to be sending all this free money to big money interests that own airline companies. We don't need to be sending all this money to things that maybe the market has decided we don't need as much anymore. Maybe we don't need all these theaters anymore. Maybe we don't need all of these museums anymore. If people want to go to it, fine, but are we going to subsidize it endlessly when otherwise we could use that money to help people get up back on their feet in a post-COVID world? Whether that's helping them retrain for remote work, or giving them extra money towards food assistance, or doing things with student loans. That's all of these dollars could go anywhere. So any dollar that's allocated towards an art museum is dollars that aren't allocated to people that are struggling to put food on the table for their families. So that's more or less my rant in a nutshell. I'm sure I could do a much deeper breakdown of where the funds are going as far as some of the waste, and I might save that for a later video. I might not, depending on how much time I have. I will say one of the things I was the most irked about as far as waste was the $89 million that they're getting on Capitol Hill for new furniture and furnishings for their offices and for the Capitol. But again, when you have a you have a 5,000 page bill that all of them have 2 hours to read, which means no one actually reads it. For, again, in this brief video, those those 10 different areas that I listed off, when there's 10 big buckets that you're sending money to and it takes 5,000 pages, there's a lot of money that's going to a lot of other things, a lot of people's pet projects, and a lot of special interest groups. So when it comes to bills in the future, definitely look past the amount of money that you and your family could be getting. Look past the amount of funds that are going to be sent towards things that may sound good on their surface, but might be more complicated or be propping up things that aren't economically sustainable and aren't going to be good for society in the long term. You got to look at what's in the bill. And again, a lot of it's relying on looking at different sources. Some news media sources better than others, of course. Try to look at a bunch of different resources to see what kind of aligns, to see where the facts are, where they agree, and look at where the money's going. That's the biggest thing I can tell you, is just always be vigilant on where the money is going. My personal opinion is that a lot more of the funds should have been distributed more equally, that we shouldn't have had, especially small businesses, what the government considers as a small business is 500 employees or less. They can borrow money. They shouldn't be getting it for free from the government. And that individuals, if we are going to send out checks, should have gotten far greater checks than what was sent out. That we should have taken the $900 billion, we should have cut it up far more equally among individuals and done things that way. Because at the end of the day, all of us are on the hook for this money. It's not like they had $900 billion just lying around in a bank account. They borrowed it. The Federal Reserve, which we'll cover in depth in this channel, printed the money. And all of us are on the hook for it. So, that being said, thank you for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe. And as always, if you have any recommendations for specific topics on these videos, feel free to leave them in the comments. Thank you and have a great night. Bye.